Good evening. I'm Micah Mater.
And I'm Ray Cortopassi.
New tonight, a scheduled meeting tonight in Thornton Township canceled.
During the special meeting, which was intended to address important township matters, Supervisor Tiffany Henyard's attempt to lead became a one-sided soliloquy due to the absence of the 5 current trustees. With no trustees present to provide input or counter-arguments, Henyard essentially dominated the conversation, using the opportunity to express her own thoughts without opposition. This absence of participation shifted the meeting away from a formal decision-making process and toward a monologue, where only Henyard's perspective was heard. Her decisions, which could have benefited from checks and balances, were presented without meaningful dialogue or feedback. This lack of collaboration highlighted the dysfunction and lack of coordination within the township leadership, where effective governance relies on the input and cooperation of all parties involved. The absence of the trustees not only undermined the purpose of the special meeting, but also raised concerns about the transparency and accountability of the township's decision-making process moving forward. The situation exposed a troubling gap in the township's ability to function cohesively and collaboratively.
Announced against controversial suburban Mayor Tiffany Henyard. The plaintiffs, they are all former employees of Thornton Township and the village of Dalton.
Yeah, we've been reporting for nearly 2 years on allegations of corruption surrounding Henyard in her capacity as Dalton mayor and Thornton Township supervisor. And now we've learned from multiple sources that federal agents are in fact interviewing.
Tiffany Henyard, the mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township, has long been a controversial figure, with a history marked by allegations of fraud, extortion threats, and other criminal activities. Her once boastful, larger-than-life persona as a so-called super mayor is now overshadowed by troubling revelations about her conduct. An ongoing FBI investigation into her actions uncovered disturbing evidence at her home, raising serious questions about whether this could result in her permanent imprisonment. Henyard, who once thrived on an image of power and invulnerability, now faces growing scrutiny as the truth behind her involvement in various illicit activities begins to unravel. The small town of Dalton, which had once been under Henyard's control, is now under a harsh spotlight. Allegations of gangster-like behavior have cast a dark shadow over her leadership, leaving many to wonder how such actions were allowed to go unchecked. Henyard's role in Dalton's current state of disarray, including the collapse of critical projects, has only heightened public concern. What was once viewed as a confident leader is now seen as a scandal-ridden figurehead, leading the community to question if this is the end of her political career or the beginning of serious legal consequences.
Political jobs on 2 public payrolls as mayor of South Suburban Dalton, or as she calls herself, super mayor, and supervisor of Thornton Township, where she makes over $200,000 a year.
Before Tiffany Henyard's election in 2021, Dalton was like any other suburban community, with its festivals, parades, and the typical mix of problems. But today, Dalton is more widely known for its controversial mayor, whose tenure has been marked by a never-ending stream of allegations. Henyard has been accused of using her dual roles as both mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township to enrich herself, indulging in lavish security details, expensive trips to Las Vegas, eye-catching billboards, and a curious donation of township tax dollars to a cancer charity, one named, unsurprisingly, after herself. The warning signs of Henyard's questionable behavior were present long before her election. Despite a difficult past, her rise to prominence began with the founding of the Henyard Carr Foundation, a breast cancer charity that at first appeared to be a noble cause. But over time, Henyard's actions began raising red flags, signaling a pattern of manipulation and self-interest rather than genuine charity work. What was initially presented as a heartfelt effort to support those affected by breast cancer quickly became a vehicle for Henyard to indulge her personal desires, using public funds to finance lavish gifts and extravagant expenses. What began as a charitable initiative soon morphed into a tool for Henyard's growing greed. Her actions didn't go unnoticed. A former chief of staff from Thornton Township, who had been ousted from their position, took it upon themselves to investigate Henyard's financial practices. Upon reviewing credit card transactions, they uncovered troubling details. Henyard had been spending thousands of taxpayer dollars on luxury lodging, extravagant meals, and various other personal expenses. These weren't small incidental amounts. They were significant sums, prompting serious concerns about the misuse of public funds. What made the situation even worse was Henyard's apparent indifference to the misuse of these funds. To her, it seemed less like a violation of the public trust and more like an entitlement. Funds were hers to spend as she wished. The more power she accumulated, the more extravagant her spending became, unchecked and excessive. The investigation into her financial habits made it clear that this wasn't a one-off mistake. It was part of a larger pattern of financial irresponsibility and an abuse of power despite mounting evidence. Henyard continued to present herself as a strong, unshaken leader, publicly unfazed by the growing accusations. Behind her bravado, however, the reality was much darker. The misuse of public funds, particularly within the context of charity, is particularly egregious. It directly undermines public trust and damages the reputation of organizations that are meant to serve those in need. Henyard's blatant disregard for accountability and her penchant for living beyond her means, all while using taxpayer dollars, had created a ticking time bomb that was bound to explode. Her charitable foundation, which could have been a powerful force for good, was instead twisted into a tool for personal gain. What followed was a whirlwind of criticism, not just of her actions, but the larger governance issues surrounding her leadership. Questions began to surface about how Henyard had been using her position to benefit herself, often at the direct expense of the very people she was meant to serve. As the fallout continued, the community began to take notice, and calls for transparency and accountability grew louder. Henyard's actions were no longer seen as isolated incidents. They were now part of a larger web of deceit that stretched through both her personal and professional life. The discovery of the questionable credit card transactions was merely the tip of the iceberg. As further investigations unfolded, even more troubling details about her financial dealings and her leadership style came to light. It was becoming increasingly clear that Henyard had crossed a line, and that the people of Dalton and Thornton Township were starting to question not just her integrity, but her ability to lead effectively. Her initial attempts to cover up her extravagant spending only added fuel to the fire, as it became more apparent that she was trying to hide the truth. As the evidence continued to mount, Henyard's reputation steadily deteriorated, and her leadership was called into question more and more. What had begun as what appeared to be a simple charitable initiative had spiraled into a full-blown scandal, leaving the community disillusioned and demanding answers in the end. Tiffany Henyard's financial recklessness and her disregard for ethical leadership became a stark warning for those in positions of power. No matter how cleverly one may try to disguise their actions, the truth will eventually surface. And when it does, it can cost you everything. The community of Dalton, once proud of their mayor's bold leadership, found itself mired in scandal, questioning the very foundation of their local government. What could have been a moment of hope and change instead became an example of how unchecked power and greed can corrupt even the most well-intentioned causes.
I can pretty much map out their entire Springfield trip on the Township credit cards.
That's a DJ.
We got our man right here coming from Dalton, Illinois, walking all the way to Springfield. Y'all make some noise for our man. The people.
But they didn't always walk.
We on motorbikes, baby.
At times, riding electric bikes.
Y'all see my bike? Our Township supervisor.
It looks like a misspending of tax funds. I think that's...
Tiffany Henyard's actions have sparked a storm of controversy, particularly regarding the misuse of public funds for her personal and political benefit. Her initial foray into questionable financial practices began with the sale of merchandise, such as hoodies and T-shirts, which she claimed were part of a charitable fundraising effort. These items could easily be ordered through Thornton Township's resources. However, when pressed about the charity, Henyard grew noticeably hesitant, especially during a board vote to allocate $110,000 to the foundation she was allegedly leading. Although she claimed to be the face of the charity, Henyard made strange statements, including claiming that her name was nowhere to be found in the organization's publicity materials. The situation only escalated when Henyard reportedly used municipal funds to promote her image on large billboards, an action many viewed as a blatant, unethical attempt to further her political career. Political consultant Del Mari explained that while using campaign funds for such promotional billboards is common, using taxpayer money for personal gain is unlawful. In 2011, state lawmakers passed a law banning politicians from using public funds for promotional signs. While the law did not directly apply to mayors, election attorney Oddson argued that Henyard's actions still violated state election laws, calling a clear misuse of public funds. But the controversy didn't stop there. Henyard's political maneuvering grew more brazen when she hired a security detail, which she referred to as her personal group of goons, shortly after taking office as mayor. Henyard personally selected the team, assigning them to protect her around the clock, which led to massive overtime payments. In May 2021, Officer Terry Young's pay was particularly staggering. He reportedly worked 303 hours over a 2-week period, resulting in a paycheck of over $113,000, a figure impossible to reconcile given that there are only 336 hours in 2 weeks. Other members of the security team also accumulated large overtime paychecks. Despite the growing costs, Henyard defended her decision, stating that the security was necessary due to threats and incidents she had faced. However, critics began questioning the need for such a large security team, particularly after reports emerged that the officers accompanied Henyard on out-of-town trips. This raised suspicions about whether security was truly for her safety or for her personal comfort. When asked about the arrangement, Henyard justified the expense by pointing to the collective bargaining agreement, CBA, with the police union claiming that the security detail was part of the contract. She argued that depending on the event, only 2 or 3 officers were required. However, as scrutiny surrounding her security expenses continued to grow, more questions emerged about the legitimacy of the arrangement. Many began to wonder whether these expenses were a personal indulgence or truly a matter of public safety as her spending habits came under fire. Henyard's grip on power became even more apparent. Those who dared to challenge or oppose her found themselves facing severe repercussions, including lawsuits and alleged acts of retaliation. One such case involved barbershop owner Tyrone Isom J., who claimed that village officials improperly denied him a business license despite his efforts to work with the village on purchasing and renovating a building. Isom alleged that after his license was denied, he faced retaliation from Henyard and other village officials, including what he described as undue pressure and hostile actions. Other individuals have also accused Henyard of dismissing employees who refused to comply with her demands, as well as gathering intelligence on those who opposed her. Many claim she used her position to assert control over critics, silencing opposition through legal and professional consequences. The situation has now become so dire that Henyard faces multiple lawsuits, 3 at the time of reporting, each reflecting a larger pattern of behavior in which individuals who don't align with her face dire consequences, from using public funds for personal gain to retaliating against those who dare to speak out against her. Tiffany Henyard's tenure as both mayor and township supervisor has been marked by a troubling abuse of power. Her security detail, misuse of taxpayer funds, retaliatory lawsuits, and reputation for suppressing opposition have cast a long shadow over Dalton and Thornton Township. As the fallout continues to unfold, it remains uncertain whether Henyard will be held accountable for the ongoing misuse of funds, the legal challenges, and the damage he has caused to the village's reputation. With each new detail that emerges, it's becoming increasingly clear that Henyard's time in power has been mired by unethical practices, and the community is now left grappling with the consequences of her leadership. What once seemed like a promising political career has devolved into a scandal that has left the people of Dalton and Thornton Township questioning their leadership and demanding answers. Whether or not Henyard will be held accountable remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: the public's trust has been severely eroded.
Board vote to give your foundation $10,000.
I'm the face of the foundation. My name is nowhere, sir. I'm the face.
In the wake of mounting complaints about Mayor Tiffany Henyard's alleged misuse of public funds, an FBI investigation was launched, triggered by repeated accusations from Dalton's village trustees about her improper financial practices. In April, the trustees had finally reached their breaking point, voting to open an official investigation into Henyard's actions. They called for an independent review, inviting everyone from the state's attorney to the FBI to thoroughly examine the village's finances. Their request was answered when it was revealed that FBI agents had begun interviewing witnesses as part of the federal probe as the investigation into Henyard's financial activities deepened. Several alarming details began to emerge. Witnesses reported that the mayor had allegedly retaliated against individuals who refused to lend her money, with some actions said to have involved inappropriate behavior in public spaces. One of the most troubling allegations involved the Melody Fitness Center, which was reportedly being used for adult parties and events. These events, which included liquor, had no identification checks for underage attendees, raising significant concerns about the propriety of such activities taking place in a publicly owned building as the board meeting progressed. It became clear just how serious the situation was. There was a concerted push to ensure that no adult parties would be held at the fitness center going forward. Despite these concerns, Henyard seemed undeterred, and the question soon became whether her actions were merely unethical or whether they had crossed a line into criminal behavior. While it was evident that her conduct was both incompetent and unethical, the pivotal question was whether it had been illegal. This is where the FBI's involvement became crucial as the investigation expanded. Subpoenas were issued to both the township and the village. In a significant development, federal prosecutors charged Keith Freeman, Henyard's former top aide, with bankruptcy fraud. Freeman, now cooperating with the investigation, has provided key insights into Henyard's financial practices, further complicating the mayor's already precarious position. One of the most shocking revelations was that Henyard had been using taxpayer money to make personal purchases on Amazon, including items that had no legitimate business or governmental purpose as discovery, combined with other financial discrepancies, painted a grim picture of gross mismanagement and the misuse of public resources. Lori Liu, a former Chicago mayor and federal prosecutor assigned to the case, discussed the preliminary findings, which pointed to several troubling issues within Henyard's administration. One of the most concerning findings was that the village had failed to conduct an annual audit since 2021, leaving the general fund's daily operations in a deficit of $3.65 million additionally. Spending on the police department had surged by 21%, with 2 officers reportedly receiving overtime compensation that exceeded their base salaries. Over $6 million worth of approved checks had not been distributed to vendors, raising further questions about how the village's finances were being handled. Even more troubling was the discovery of 6 credit cards associated with the village, with receipts that were either missing or rarely provided. Among the most significant expenditures under investigation was a series of purchases totaling $40,000 on Amazon, which appeared to be personal spending rather than legitimate municipal needs, a revelation that Henyard had been using taxpayer money for personal purchases, such as items from Amazon, only intensified the public suspicions that she had been mismanaging public funds for her own benefit. The situation was becoming increasingly dire for Henyard as it became clear that her administration had been operating without proper oversight, failing to account for millions of dollars in public funds. The lack of a thorough audit and the blatant misuse of funds, such as personal Amazon purchases and unchecked overtime, painted a damning picture of her leadership. Many questioned how Henyard could have thought she could get away with such actions, given growing scrutiny and mounting evidence against her. In the eyes of the public, her behavior was not only grossly unethical, but also financially reckless. The central question remained: would Henyard face legal consequences for her actions? As federal prosecutors continued their work, and with Freeman cooperating, it seemed increasingly likely that Henyard would face serious legal repercussions, adding fuel to the fire of public outrage. The investigation into Henyard's spending habits revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that raised questions about her competence and integrity as a public official. Her personal spending, especially with taxpayer money, and her apparent disregard for financial oversight painted a portrait of a leader who had failed to serve the people she was elected to represent. For many in Dalton, the question wasn't just whether Henyard had misused funds. It was whether she had abused the trust of the community. The situation grew even more complicated as Henyard's actions seemed to reflect a broader pattern of negligence and misconduct. From retaliating against those who questioned her, to hiring a security detail at taxpayer expense, to misappropriating funds for personal gain, Henyard's leadership had become deeply controversial. The growing legal challenges and ongoing federal investigation made it clear that Henyard's time in office could be nearing its end as more revelations emerged. The case against Henyard grew stronger, making it increasingly difficult for her to justify her actions. The community of Dalton, once proud of their mayor, was now left grappling with the fallout from her alleged misuse of their tax dollars. Whether Henyard will be held accountable for the alleged financial mismanagement, legal violations, and damage to the community's reputation remains uncertain. However, one thing is clear: the public is demanding answers, and the pressure on Henyard to explain herself continues to mount in the coming months. It will be up to the legal system to decide whether Tiffany Henyard's alleged actions will have serious legal consequences, or the investigation will ultimately conclude with less severe repercussions. The unfolding story leaves the people of Dalton and Thornton Township wondering if they will ever see justice for the misuse of their tax dollars, and whether their trust in local leadership can ever be fully restored.
3 lawsuits just announced against controversial suburban Mayor Tiffany Henyard. The plaintiffs, they are all former employees of Thornton Township and the village of...
The plaintiffs, all former employees of Thornton Township and the village of Dalton, are alleging wrongful termination. Among them are a former HR manager, a public works administrative assistant, and a buildings department director. Their claims include retaliation and firing for refusing to comply with Henyard's requests, such as punishing business owners who didn't support her, suppressing FOIA requests, and digging up dirt on other employees. An attorney representing the women states that several similar lawsuits are currently in progress.
Another new lawsuit filed against embattled Dalton Mayor and Thornton Township Supervisor Tiffany Henyard.
This time by a 20-year Thornton Township employee who says he was wrongly fired after refusing to comply with an alleged scheme by Henyard's team.
Amidst growing scrutiny, Tiffany Henyard's actions have become the subject of federal investigation, which has now expanded its scope to include not just the city of Dalton, where she serves as mayor, but also Thornton Township, where she holds the role of supervisor. Former FBI agent Ross Rice has confirmed that the investigation is broadening, with subpoenas revealing a deepening inquiry into Henyard's financial dealings. This now includes scrutiny of 2 businesses she owns, a restaurant and a property management company, in addition to her political fund and charity, These revelations have raised serious concerns about the alleged misuse of public funds, casting a shadow over Henyard's leadership both as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township. As the investigation continues, Henyard has faced accusations from multiple sources. One of her former aides publicly speaking out about the sexual harassment and mistreatment she allegedly endured while working under Henyard's leadership. Despite the mounting pressure, Henyard has made attempts to shift the blame for the controversies onto others, most notably her former chief aide, Keith Freeman. Henyard's defense strategy hinges on the argument that Freeman, a more experienced figure, was largely responsible for the questionable spending decisions made during her tenure. Her defense team is attempting to portray her as a political newcomer who relied heavily on Freeman's guidance and expertise when making decisions about the village's operations, suggesting that she was unaware of the extravagant purchases and spending. This defense strategy became apparent during her deposition, where Henyard stated that she did not handle the day-to-day affairs of the village, instead relying on Freeman and other leadership figures to manage financial decisions. The narrative being presented by Henyard's team is one of innocence, positioning her as a leader misled by more experienced aides, attempting to distance her from the questionable spending practices that have been uncovered. However, despite the ongoing federal investigation and the mounting accusations against her, Henyard appears determined to continue her political career. She has made concerted efforts to maintain a public presence and push for re-election, particularly in her role as supervisor of Thornton Township. Henyard's strategy seems to focus on securing the support of senior citizens, a demographic she believes will be crucial in her re-election bid. By prioritizing services and events geared towards seniors, Henyard is working to solidify her position with this key voter group. Nevertheless, her tactics have drawn criticism. Many believe that Henyard's extended speeches and media appearances are less about serving the public and more about self-promotion and securing votes. A notable example of this was her 40-minute uninterrupted speech, during which she addressed her supporters and the media. This move was widely seen as a deliberate effort to ensure that she could communicate her message without interference from trustees or the public. By controlling the narrative and preventing interruptions, Henyard appeared to be focusing more on maintaining a strong political presence than on addressing the allegations swirling around her. Henyard's focus on securing the votes of senior citizens is also evident in her public statements, where she repeatedly emphasizes her commitment to advocating for their needs. She has cast herself as a defender of seniors, positioning herself as someone who is focused on improving the lives of the elderly, especially in a time of heightened public scrutiny. However, many see this rhetoric as part of a broader political strategy to distract from the growing allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and misconduct. While Henyard's desire for re-election is unmistakable, her tactics of manipulating public opinion and playing the victim have become increasingly apparent. She has relied on the narrative that she is being unjustly targeted by political opponents and the media, while simultaneously attempting to cast herself as a defender of the public and champion of senior citizens' rights. This attempt to frame herself as a victim of a political witch hunt plays directly into her broader strategy of positioning herself as someone who is looking out for her constituents, all while deflecting attention from the growing investigations into her financial and ethical conduct. Despite her efforts to shape the narrative, it seems increasingly unlikely that Henyard will be able to escape the consequences of her actions. The federal investigation continues to unfold, and mounting evidence suggests that Henyard may soon face significant legal repercussions. The discovery of her personal spending habits, including purchases made on taxpayer money, combined with the questionable practices at both Dalton and Thornton Township, has already damaged her public reputation. As more revelations emerge, it becomes clear that Henyard's actions will likely lead to legal and political consequences as federal prosecutors dig deeper. Henyard's attempts to shift the blame onto others may only serve to alienate her further from the public and the people she claims to serve. The FBI's involvement in the case signals the seriousness of the allegations against her, and the investigation's continued focus on her financial dealings suggests that more damaging revelations could be on the horizon. Henyard's narrative of being a victim of political attacks, along with her efforts to deflect responsibility, seem increasingly transparent and may backfire as public sentiment grows more hostile. As the investigation gathers pace, it's becoming more apparent that Henyard's political career could be nearing its end, with the possibility of criminal charges looming large. It seems unlikely that she will be able to escape the mounting legal and political consequences of her behavior. The residents of Dalton and Thornton Township are left grappling with the fallout from Henyard's alleged misuse of public funds. As the investigation unfolds, they are left wondering how much more corruption and mismanagement will be uncovered. For Henyard, the clock is ticking, and with each new revelation, it becomes more likely that her time in office will come to a close. While Henyard continues to attempt to maintain her grip on power, it seems the truth about her actions is beginning to catch up with her. The mounting legal challenges and growing public outrage indicate that the consequences of her behavior may be more severe than anyone anticipated. With the FBI's probe ongoing, Henyard may not be able to escape the scrutiny much longer. The full extent of her alleged actions will likely be revealed in the coming months, and it is becoming increasingly clear that Henyard's political future is uncertain as the investigation continues. More details are likely to emerge, and it seems that the truth about Henyard's tenure as Mayor of Dalton and Supervisor of Thornton Township may be more damaging than anyone could have predicted. For now, the residents of these communities are left to watch as the investigation unfolds, awaiting the legal consequences that may follow.